Hello everybody, hope you're doing great. I'm not Warren Ewart, as you can see. I'm Kristian Kohle from Germany, and today we want to talk about multi-channel audio, surround audio, immersive audio, all that kind of stuff. And if you don't know much about it, welcome to the club, so do I. But the good news is that I have two real experts here who will enlighten us. Here we go. So I'm here with Alvin Wee at his brand new studio, and he is known for making great sounding surround mixes for both movies and video games, right? Nice to have you, man.
Good to meet you.
And on the other side, we've got Martins from Sonarworks, and you are the co-founder, is that correct?
Yes.
Right. And those two people will help me to understand what surround is, will explain the different formats or protocols. So are you mixing in Atmos here?
No, not yet. I do mix in Atmos, but just in general, I mix in surround. And as you can tell, I have 5 speakers and 1 sub, so it's a 5.1 setup. It's scalable depending on how many speakers you have. So you can go from 5.1 to 7.1, and then from 7.1 you can go up to, like in Dolby Atmos, you can do 7.1.4, 7.1.2, or even 9.1.4 and 9.1.6. And the last number refers to the amount of speakers on the ceiling.
Okay, so there are different Atmos setups.
Yeah.
And how did you, because I have been mixing music for 25 years, but always in stereo.
Right.
So when did you start mixing, and why did you start mixing in surround?
I started in stereo just like you. So again, 2 speakers, you get a lot of great things. You don't really, miss a lot. But then I also work in films and video games. And in films especially, you get you get to be in a theater and it's immersive, and with more speakers, you get to feel you're more kind of involved in the movie from a sonic experience. When I moved into doing films, mixing scores for films, I started doing surround, and I started in a 5.1, and I still do 5.1, and sometimes I do 7.1.
Okay. And what is the most difficult part about mixing music in surround?
A huge part of mixing surround that you kind of managing is that there's a lot more low end to work with, and I think when you're mixing in stereo, you have that this is your bandwidth and this is what you do with them. But in surround, it opens up an extra dimension. Everything's in the back, but you want to make sure that the listener is still listening to it in a kind of cohesive environment, and you don't want your vocals to come from the back, or you don't want, maybe you do, if it's a creative decision, but I think it's kind of balancing the technical and creative with just extra speakers.
I guess very often you need both a stereo mix and a surround mix. Do you start with a stereo mix and then move on, or is that like one process? Or?
That's actually a very good question. For me at least, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and at least in surround. And so what I like doing is to have both mixes set up when I mix, and I may go back to check my stereo mix from time to time while I'm mixing, but in general, I'm monitoring in surround. So I hear everything, I hear my surrounds, I hear my center, my left, my right, my sub, and I mix that, and I already have my chain and my processing to get my stereo mix ready. Obviously, I print that as a reference for people who want to listen to it in stereo, and they may not have this system like in their homes, or they don't have a 5.1 setup with a soundbar or anything. They can at least listen to the reference of the music in some sort of a balance. And then when later on, if I am able to take this 5.1 to make it into a, let's say, an album for stereo, then I come back and revisit the stereo a little bit, because there's always a little bit of difference between going from 3 speakers in the front and 2 speakers at the back to 2 speakers, and that's just kind of rebalancing the dynamics of that.
Tell us something about the projects you've been working on. They're pretty big stuff, right? Netflix, Disney, right?
I've been very fortunate. Yes, I just got off Encanto from last year. That was a big undertaking. It was a huge team. I was very proud to be part of a huge team that got that through the finish line. I was very proud of that as well. We won an award, the Cinema Audio Society Award. And me being part of it as the score mixer, I was involved with another song mixer who did the songs and the sound effects and the re-recording mixer. And that's kind of the team in Encanto. And again, I was part of the music team for Top Gun Maverick that just came out. It was a just massively fun experience. There was 2 mixers on it, and there were like people recording, and we were at the height of, this whole lockdown at that point. So, recording musicians was tricky. Yeah. And not only recording musicians was tricky, having, like I said, being in movies where everything, should more or less feel like it envelops you, having to translate single source audio into surround was also a huge challenge in that. But the whole team got it through. I was, very, very fortunate to be part of that, and the music team. And obviously there's, Hans Zimmer, who wrote the score, and Lady Gaga, who did the song for it, and Harold, the original composer for Top Gun, who was part of the whole process as well. It was fun because I was here in LA, but then some of it was done in the UK, some of it was done, in New York, and so kind of managing all of that. I think a huge part of it is to ensure translation between all these systems.
But you started out as mixing music, right?
Yes.
Albums.
Yeah.
And when did you enter the other side, the movie business, the game business?
It wasn't intentional. I still go between both. I still produce a lot of records in Asia, and because
what kind of music?
It's pop music. So just in generally, like I do a lot of R&B and a lot of pop, and a couple of ballads here and there. But generally, it's all songs and like cool beats with great singers. That part of it has been trending towards the, like we said, immersive audio, Dolby Atmos kind of systems, and people are starting to embrace that there as well, just like everywhere else in the world. So, when I was doing that, I was already doing the film stuff, and so I was doing both in tandem. And I think I crossed over kind of doing a lot of film stuff in the last 7 years. And it started with this small little film called Dope, and it was the songs were produced by Pharrell Williams, and then the score was done by Jermaine Franco, who also did Encanto. So that was my first experience in doing songs, like kind of beats and songs and score.
That's when you started working in surround.
Yes.
Before it was just the music, it was just stereo.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And was it difficult to set it up when you did that first? The 5.1, I assume?
Setting up speakers and understanding how to set it up and understanding how to calibrate speakers in a room is very, very important. And it was very interesting that I had to we when we all start, we have our mentors and we learn and we tweak, and as we go along, we try to figure out what we want, what we like. Obviously, now I have a pair like ATCs and all that. And when I started, I was on NS10s and trying to, when I went from that to ATCs, I love that, and I love how that translated the 5.1. So I was like, okay,
that was a good move. From NS10 to ATCs.
Oh, absolutely. But yes, I had to learn how to calibrate it, and I think one of my first assistant jobs trying to get into this 5.1 world was to set up speakers. I had to you do the tweaking, you do the calibration, the EQs, and all that. And that was a huge part of me learning and understanding how those speakers work in a room and how the acoustics of a room matters a lot.
May I ask here, actually, there is this creativity versus the quality of the sound in the studio. There are certainly people, I believe more so on the studio side, who are but it's actually all about the song, and kind of either it's a good song and then it's gonna work no matter what, or kind of it's not a good song and it doesn't matter if you have the top-notch speakers or not. Right. And how do you feel about that? Do you know that kind of discussion, and where do you stand in that?
Well,
what's the importance of quality of sound during creation of the piece of music?
I think it's absolutely necessary, and it should never take away from the creativity. It should always be something that's always there, I think, right? All of us, we all here work in professional music and professional audio. And it should be it's like a safety for car. You definitely need it there before any features, before anything else. So, I don't want to be bogged down by worrying about it. So I want to do it once, have it all set up, make sure it's all working, make sure the room is as pristine as possible, then go into the creative, then we can all figure out how to do things without worrying that, is my bass too loud, or is my kick drum too loud, or why are the cymbals so sizzly in this room but it does not translate, So I think a lot of it has to kind of, they play together, and I think it should be an absolute necessity to get that done first before we go into the creativity.
Absolutely.
Have you experienced some time when bad sound or kind of lack of translation gets into the way of good creativity, of great creativity?
Oh, I mean, yeah. It's sometimes you're like, let's say you're producing a track, right? Like you're being a producer, and you start writing or you start putting music together, and you're adding certain stuff. And I talk a lot about low frequency, low end management, and all that. Like with surround, especially. If you're not hearing or you're hearing too much of it, you're not putting in enough. And I remember kind of moving from one room to another, and like I had this really nice 808 in the track, and it was like bumping, right? But I couldn't hear it in the other room, so I was just turning it up like 6, 7, 8, 10 dB louder than what I usually do. That then translates, and you go into the mastering room, and they have their room calibrated. These people have like giant big speakers, and it was just like, oh. Like I can't hear anything else. So like literally I was just pushing things that wasn't there in the first place. So like while it felt like I was enjoying it, it didn't really mesh with the rest of the track.
And I always say there's no taste when we talk about low end. We just want it to be linear. Like a low end like this, there might be taste in like other frequencies where different tweeters and stuff like that. But low end, the more linear the low end is, the better it is, the better it translates. And that's why room acoustics are so important. Tell me something about the setup. I see those beautiful ATC speakers here. What else do we have in the monitoring chain?
Like we said, talking about Dolby Atmos and immersive audio, I am in the process of trying to figure out how to expand my setup. I am right now running a Apogee Ensemble, a Thunderbolt. I guess one of the few score mixers who love working on a laptop. I like the portability of it. I think that comes from like the working with producers and songwriters where everyone wants to go into an island. Like I'm originally from an island in Malaysia called Borneo. So like I want to be able to take my laptop and go there and work. I don't want to be like kind of bogged down, but I want to make sure that when I'm in a room, I absolutely know what's going on. So I have my ATC speakers. I run it through my laptop into the Apogee Thunderbolt, and that Thunderbolt then sends it out to my 5 speakers in the sub.
And the Apogee is also the monitor controller.
The Apogee is a monitor controller, yes. I run my faders through Yukon on the S3, and everything else is kind of minimally invasive in the channel path. I would say right now, I really feel a huge part of your mix is the room that you're in. Whether you're recording it or whether you're mixing, the room adds a lot. So I think I've been working very hard and still kind of integrating things into my my setup where I can remove as much of the intrusive parts of the room as I can. And it's been very helpful with this like software, room correction software that I've been using on my bus. For the first 2-3 months, and this was before, having any room correction software, things were wonky. So like, it was like tweaking, going back, listening to headphones, bringing headphones in, sending things out. And you're like, I'm not sure. Then, send things to mastering and they're like, hey, so like you compare, you send to people, you make sure that they listen to it and they're hearing it and they know what's going on, right? I was very nervous. And so then, I, again, looked up what I could do to make this room a little more calibrated. And that's where I found Sonarworks, and that's been kind of
how important is the room correction?
Absolutely necessary. I think wherever you go, whether you're using something where either you have an acoustician that you get to come in, or people you can hire, professionals to do that, and they come in, they spend a day, which I don't have, first of all, because like I gotta hit the ground running. It's like as someone who's working, kind of a working professional, where like I have deadlines to meet, and like with all these Netflix deadlines and Disney Plus and whatever and whatnot, they have a schedule to keep. I have to make sure I keep it, and I was trying to get my room set up while doing that. So I'm in the midst of doing that, now trying to get the room calibrated, and then trying to think of Dolby Atmos as well. So it's just a whole thing, and like, the room correction software that has seemed to work the best, and just kind of the way it was tweaked for my needs, was like something that was, you do like sort it out for me and it'll be done, And so like I think Sonarworks has been like I think they call it SoundID, and that's kind of been my go-to, and I use it. It's on my system every day now.
Couldn't work without it.
Yeah, couldn't work without it. That's true.
How would you actually, for somebody who doesn't use our SoundID reference, how would you describe the benefit of it to somebody who is like, who hasn't yet tried.
Here's how I think about it. Like, you can walk everywhere. It sure as damn hell helps to have a car because you get places faster. And so I think that's how I feel about the SoundID. I could work, we can mix anywhere, right? These days, people do it on headphones, people do it on Proags. We have all kinds of speakers now, PMCs, ATCs, and I was just learning about all this different, I think Amphion was another one that was coming up and stuff, and so there's so many options, and you can totally do it. It's just how much effort and how much time do you want to spend fighting against a thing that eventually just helps.
And do you actually happen to collaborate over distance on musical projects and kind of discuss things about sound on Zoom or whichever other platform, talking about how the guitar should sound while you have ATC speakers and somebody has something else?
On a big project, the score mixer mixes in a room. Yeah. The re-recording mixer mixes in their own room. And, Encounter was done, the re-recording was done in Skywalker Sound. So I had to make sure that what I did here and whatever I add translated to whatever, we were kind of going between song and score and into the movie, and you want to make sure they all kind of work together. Yeah. So yes, there's a lot of does this kind of come through and does that kind of, lead in and move out to the next thing, or is the dialogue supposed to work? And I think this is kind of pretty important for any film where I'm doing a song now, but the song has to feel like it's part of a scene, but then it's not the re-recording mixer who's doing that because it's an actual performance. So how do you do that? And so I have to do it, and they will either send me all the vocals that they did in a re-recording stage or a ADR studio, and I have to match that to make sure that it fits in the song, but it also fits in the scene. So there's a lot of them sending me stuff and then sending the other people, and I have to make sure that translation works.
And does it help in that context if all of the rooms are calibrated to the same reference sound?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So you guys released the multi-channel version of SoundID Reference. Is this just more channels?
So we've had our stereo version of the software now for quite some time, and it has been through various versions of the product. We released our multi-channel version of SoundID Reference, and it now enables you to calibrate any room up to 916 Dolby Atmos standard. So what we do is we help the user, we bring a DIY solution to room calibration that basically anyone can use, and
it stays the same. So what I know from from the stereo setup is
you can just now have more channels calibrated frequency response wise. We are also now added more granularity to the level adjustment, because for multi-channel setups that is really important, so that the levels are matched between speakers. And the third thing is we also do super accurate time alignment of the channels, which is also really important, because if the sound arrives at different moments, if the same sound arrives at different moments from all the speakers that you have in the room, then the soundstage becomes pretty terrible. So
even if people don't have a perfect setup, like you might have, that it can be corrected because it measures the delays between the...
Just to be sure, we're not claiming to be a replacement for room design or room treatment. You absolutely should do the best possible job in designing your room and in spacing the speakers correctly. That's the best way to do it. That said, for any given room situation, and I haven't yet seen the perfect room where it's done, it's symmetric and kind of everything is just analogically perfect. Kind of basically for any room situation, we are probably the best price performance improvement, and we actually can get the sound to be super accurate. We've been now showing it around some pretty influential people around here in Hollywood, and everybody has been blown away by what we can do within an hour, where normally the expert tuning would take a day.
I also just decided, by the way, I've been working in 2 other studios here in LA, and I decided 2 things. First of all, I need a mobile rig. I don't want a Pro Tools operator to tell him to solo that track. And I just need something there, and I need room calibration. So I was working at 2 great studios, but the monitoring was just weird, and then they set up the speakers somewhere. And you don't have the time, so... I'm a Sonarworks user as well, but I'm going to take it with me on the road, whatever. That's the first thing you do in the morning, because otherwise it's a shot in the dark if you try mixing there.
It was the story one of our old-time friends and endorsers, Mark Needham, has been telling, that he's usually working with projects across different studios, and so he's a great guy and he can obviously work in any room, but then he says first thing I do when I go into a studio, I just calibrate it so that within for a stereo set up the calibration with our software takes like 30 minutes. So first thing you do, like you calibrate the room so you can actually know the sound right off, and you don't need to spend more time learning what this particular room sounds like and how to work around it. So the kind of moving between rooms is definitely helpful to calibrate them.
But what you guys still need to explain to me is like the Atmos thing. So we have 5.1, right? Yeah. I get it. And Atmos is the next level. And what people have been saying is that it can even be translated to a normal headphone playback system. Because I think the problem of surround has been, except for cinemas, that not everybody has a perfect playback system at home. So how does that work?
I can explain, but
with Atmos, and you're talking about earphones and all that, you know, a lot of people, consumers, whether it's song, whether it's score or whatever, people, talking about mobile rigs, people want to be on the go. You know, people want to consume music as easily as possible, and the best way is through headphones while they're traveling, while they're commuting. So what Atmos does is it adds that additional level of experience where you can feel the music to be kind of surrounding you through a pair of headphones. And obviously Dolby Laboratories has made the algorithms to kind of, you know, create that, and they're very intelligent people, and I think it's really cool. Now the thing is how we use that technology to kind of add another dimension of experience to the listeners. And for mixers and people who are creators, content creators, producers, songwriters, it gives you an additional layer of like creativity, you know? Where do you want to place something? Like, you know, think about it, if you want to think about it as like, if it's a live concert, right, that maybe you're not viewing, but you want to feel like whether you're in the audience, or maybe you want to feel like you're in the stage, or whether you feel like you're behind backstage kind of watching it.
Inside the kick drum.
Yeah, exactly, inside the kick, that would be awesome. So these extra speakers helps that.
Does it work like those binaural microphones? Is it that thing? I know this Neumann head.
I would explain, starting from the creation side. Dolby Atmos is basically a sound encoding and transportation standard that enables you to create acoustic experience, like sound experiences in 3 dimensions. Mm-hmm. You can basically place any sound anywhere around you, and for a creator part, like the best sounding Atmos mixes so far are being created in studios that have like 916, 16 speakers. So you have like 16 speakers surrounding you, which gives you a lot of power and resolution to place any sound anywhere. And that, as Alvin was saying, opens up a lot of creativity. Now the question is how to deliver it.
Just one question, like the more speakers, the more accurate your listening environment. Is that?
Yes, but practically, like it gives more spatial resolution. The more accurately you can place something exactly where you want it to be in the room around you. The next good question is, okay, that's the creative part, but where can consumers experience it? On the other side, and the way Atmos is built as a standard is that you can basically scale the playback to whatever amount of speakers you have on the consumer side. So if you have a stereo pair of speakers, okay, you can still listen to the stereo mix. If you happen to be the type of a person who has 7 speakers in your living room and 4 more on the ceiling, you can basically recreate the same studio experience. And then, of course, a lot of push on the technology side is how do you recreate that experience on headphones? In theory, it should be possible. We're still perceiving the 3-dimensional sound of the world via 2 ears, right? So it should be enough. Yeah. It's just a question of whether we know the right algorithms of how to do that, and there's certainly a lot of development going on. So Apple Music and kind of Netflix have definitely been pushing into, hey, how do we recreate? I mean, that's certainly something where a lot of technology development is still going on, how to bring that realistic experience of Atmos.
But is it here already?
It's here already, but I think it's actually becoming better and better. Like today it's better than it was like 3 months ago. 3 months ago it's better than it was like 6 months ago. And I believe like 6 months from now it's going to be even better. I mean, the ultimate goal would be to get to a place where you put the headphones on and you can't tell the difference whether you're in a room with 16 speakers or whether you're on headphones. We're not there yet. So in a way, this headphone experience is kind of...
Who's currently supporting this? You said Apple Music does? I mean, Netflix does for all the movie platforms. What about music platforms like Spotify?
So Apple Music does support it. I think Tidal supports it. Amazon Music definitely supports it. The big labels are kind of supporting it. They're now upmixing some of the old catalog to Dolby Atmos, and certainly a lot of new artists are now also kind of experimenting with the space, but it's very much a thing into creation as we speak, I think.
And how does it work? So I can switch to an Atmos version and I have to tell the player what my listening environment looks like, right? I have to tell I'm listening on a stereo.
I mean, on a device, it's figuring itself out. Like on a streaming player like Apple Music or Amazon Music, you just need to select whether you want to experience the spatial sound or not. And then if you're selected that you want to do it, then if the track has an Atmos content to it, then it will kind of do its best to recreate that experience on your headphones.
And it doesn't matter if you have headphones or 5 speakers or 3, then it will That's great.
Yeah.
It's also great for music.
It's great. Yeah, it's great. It's great for a lot of things, and I think having just to kind of to speak to that and like to be able to create that, you need to have a space to have you need to have a kitchen where you can bring all these ingredients, put it all together, and then present it to the consumer, the listener, and all that. And I think like having a space with all these speakers is important in the creation process of that, and kind of to bring it back a little bit to just how being able to hear all these details with the resolution that like Martin was saying, like we need to have the space, the speaker, the actual technology, which like we said, Dolby is kind of leading and Apple's kind of pushing as well, and having the studios kind of being behind and adopting this technology. I think it's very helpful that we're all kind of trying to figure this technology out and how we can use it to like the greatest advantage and make cooler and cooler stuff. And with indie bands doing really cool stuff nowadays, and even with big labels, I think it's great.
It sounds like a technology that can finally take surround, like from the cinema into whatever, the living room, the bedroom, like anywhere, because that has been, at least where I come from, the problem that the playback system is too complex for the ordinary user.
After this year's NAMM, I think it seems that car audio is certainly the next kind of frontier where this is going to go, and because you can pre-install it in a car, so you don't need to buy any extra speakers. You just take your car sound experience to the next level.
And is your plan to turn this into an Atmos room now, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is, I do have some colleagues who work also as mixers, and like we're talking about, there is a huge push for Dolby Atmos, and a lot of artists are requesting it, a lot of composers are requesting it, a lot of studios are requesting it. So rather than not have it, I am putting it in. I'm planning for like 916 right now. I do like the 6 speakers because I think it's like having a screen with more pixels. Then you can see it a little better. So I am considering the type of speakers, the interface that I need to switch to, the room correction that comes with those interfaces.
That's already fixed.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, there we go. And cabling and I think I am literally in the process right now.
Do all the DAW support that right now? I guess Nuendo does and Pro Tools does?
Nuendo, Pro Tools definitely supports it. Logic is, I think, natively supporting it, meaning like with all these other DAWs, you need to connect to what they call a Dolby Atmos renderer. And with Logic, everything's contained in there, and you can just bounce off there to get Atmos. I think it's just a different way of working. Some people like the separation because then they can like split their heads and say, this is my mix, or this is my song, and this is the Dolby stuff. And I have a visualizer, and I will see it there, and I can kind of split that into 2 different processes. I think most DAWs support Dolby now.
I do already feel a lot smarter, thanks to you guys. I got to say that. So where do you get your information about this topic? Like, where should people go if they want to learn something?
I think you go straight to the source, right? It's called Dolby Atmos. Dolby puts it out, so they have great resources on their website. When I was first kind of trying to like you said, knocking around and trying to figure out the technology, I was trying to read up about it, and Dolby has an extensive resource there. And I went to the website and started reading it, and we were in the process of doing a podcast actually, and that was supposed to be done in Dolby Atmos. So I spent like 2 weeks kind of just reading through all the resources. And YouTube being another place that's great for that. I watch a couple of videos that Avid puts out. The Avid
We're
website.
creating this information right now.
Yes. So basically the internet. That's what I'm saying. And then talking to a lot of people, and like, you know, as you speak to people, like everyone's starting to learn what's good and what's not. And because I come from the film world, you know, quite a bit, I talk to a lot of my colleagues who, you know, they are re-recording mixers, and those are people I send things to. So I have that resource, and they've spent more time with it. And as we know, Dolby Atmos has been a technology that, you know, it started out quite a few years back, and not a lot of people knew about it. And you know, it's slowly starting to get into the consciousness of people. But back in the day, it was those few people who had it. And so I spoke to them and asked them how they did things, and that's kind of a lot of my resources. But the best way for me to like understand it and how I did it was the Dolby website and the YouTube videos. You know, you look up like what Dolby Atmos is, and there's plenty of content out there right now.
Let's talk about the future. So, upcoming features in Sonarworks first.
Where we want to go is to make the user experience of calibrating your multi-channel room as seamless as possible. We'll be going into a lot more integrations with different hardware partners. So we basically want to get to a place where you create your room profile using our software, then click a button, and your system is just kind of sounding great, and you don't need to, you need to do as little as possible.
You also started integrating it into hardware, right? I've seen the merging.
Yes, we already have a couple of integrations with merging, with Wayne Jones. Soon we'll be launching an integration with Adam Audio, and there are a number of other partners we're working on. So keep an eye out for new announcements. But basically, we want to kind of be as seamless as possible into the studio environment so that we can.
It's already pretty idiot-proof, so it even works for people like me. But what about you? The future of surround? Where are we going?
You know, I like to see people being able to kind of piggy off back that, but like having, you know, because I work in a laptop, I like to be able to switch between rooms and have it sound just equally as good. And because Dolby is, with Dolby Atmos, you can have different configurations, like we said, 916, 712, 514, whatever it is. I want to be able to kind of go between all of that and have it be as consistently similar as much as I can without having to spend, you know, 12 hours trying to figure it out and like trying to integrate, like, oh, you need to install this plugin or have this hardware, and then you have to do that, and you do connect to that computer, then that computer goes to your, you know, system. So,
and what's missing right now?
I think what's missing is just adoption across people, you know, all platforms, all different systems. Like once people start adopting it and say, hey, you know, here's a good way of doing it, I think that will be great, and it'll be easy kind of going through different people.
And you know what? I feel enlightened now. So I gotta say thank you, guys. So in the description below, we will put a lot of links to your amazing work and to Sonarworks, and hopefully all the information you need. But yeah, I gotta say thank you for this great information.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you guys soon. Bye-bye.